we have in our studios this morning Dr. Sunday Dare, who is Special Advisor to the President on Media and Public Communications. It is good to see you in our studios. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Mopi. Thank you for having me.
Well, clearly, last week we did kick off this campaign season with conversations around subsidy. Yes, it's exactly a week now that conversation started. I'm sure that has been, we certainly will get there, but this came to the fore just while that subsidy debate was going on. And one of the very instructive things about what exactly the gains, what should be the gains from the removal of subsidy is that we shouldn't see situations like this on our roads, that we should have a lot more money to be able to fix roads, fix our health care, put money in education, etc. But clearly, we're still failing in many aspects, which is still leading to the suffering of citizens. How does your the administration of President Bola Tinubu explain what exactly happened along stretches that we have now seen in both Benin to Asaba, as well as stretches of Ekiti to Ondo?
Well, I think that, first, these are isolated cases. And we all know by the nature of road construction, during raining season, you encounter problems like this. When it also comes to constructing the roads, whether rehabilitation or building new roads, you also will know the local content policy. They need to engage competent local contractors. And whatever played out yesterday, we had all the stakeholders there. And it's important that even the contractor came out, even though he gave excuses, it showed a failure on the part. Government has a responsibility to identify the roads that need to be fixed. Government has a responsibility to provide the funding. And then the next responsibility goes to the contractors to do what is necessary. And what we saw yesterday, the minister, the National Assembly members, and other key stakeholders going there in record time, right on the spot. And I think that's what good governance is about, responding as quickly and as swiftly as possible, putting the blame where it is, and requesting for immediate action. Beyond that, we see efforts in other places. I said this is isolated, but we have quite a number of other roads where there are no complaints, where the roads have been fixed, So when it comes to good governance, when it comes to infrastructural provision, it is a progressive work.
You say record time. I heard that particular term will be held suspect, because record time would have been that we anticipate that such a situation will come. For instance, we know that we will experience a rainy season. We know that such a thing, was most likely to happen because it's happened before. It happened during the Buhari administration, this particular stretch of road. It clearly, we did not anticipate it. And people had already suffered. According to a number of them, they had spent 4 days. So clearly, a record will be very suspect.
Without making any excuses, you just mentioned it. I think that this particular road has been quite a difficult one, and it has transcended about 3 or 4 presidents trying to make sure the road is fixed. I think what's important, Mope, when I said record time, there's always a project timeline. That's what I mean by record time. And because of the rains, the contractor talked about palliatives. And what we see in this instance is that whatever palliative work it did on the roads were not professionally done, very clearly. And we know that the Minister of Works is going to take some punitive action against them. And that will serve as a warning to several other contractors across the length and breadth. Don't forget, apart from the local content policy, we've had the Engineering Society and all professional groups making a very strong case that we have competent Nigerian engineers. And I have no doubt about it. But then when you're given the job to do, you know that you hold as a responsibility to the people who will use the road, and also to the government who gave you the job.
Yeah, but I think that also raises further questions, because I heard the minister say something to the effect that he was technically incompetent, which raises, how did we come about getting an incompetent contractor to do such an important stretch of road?
Well, without holding forth for the minister, Mope, you also know that there's a procurement process. You present your documents, the work you have done. You bring your engineers to articulate what they would do. Oftentimes, you also find a gulf between what is presented and the procurement process in terms of competences. and then when it's translated into practical. And, you know, incidences like this, you cannot really avoid them. I think what's important is that perhaps the level of technical competency should be looked at again, vis-a-vis the nature of our roads, and the KPIs for those that would take these contracts should be reviewed. That's what's important going forward.
Do you think that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has really been on top of things when it comes to that? Because this is not the only road. I mean, you've just said that even though you say that what I have cited are isolated incidents.
Yeah, it's a vast country.
It is indeed.
You know,
and I was just going to say that I'm sure a lot of Nigerians will disagree with you. I do recall that even just a few months ago, passing the some stretches of Kogi, you know, the federal roads in Kogi, have been quite a nightmare. I recall a friend of mine who tried to traverse that road and had to turn back. The traffic was unbearable. You know, the road was just impassable.
So, oftentimes,
yes,
what we expect is 100% solution. And you know, solutions are progressive. I've traveled on the stretch with about 65 other journalists about 4 weeks ago. We went to Kogi State, and we saw the effort between Abuja, the Lokoja stretch, going down to Umaru. Concrete road being built. Such different sections, some 20%, some 15%. And that's what happens with road construction. You build them in points and eventually you join them. So you have stretches in which you have to travel on the old road with both cars coming in opposite direction, pending when you can switch to the one that's been completed. This is evidential. We saw them. Stretches have been done. And I think Nigerians will have to bear with that process of work. It's like a house construction. A house is not built in a day. It's progressive. The roof, until the roof comes on, the rain will still pour down on the building. And I think, is President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on top of what's happening? Absolutely. Mopi, we're talking about 5 legacy roads. We're talking about 320 roads across the length and breadth of our country. A massive infrastructural effort of road construction. I think that's appreciable. It shows the president that is really at top of the situation. Of course, why do you have ministers? Why are they assigned? So we see the Minister of Work assigned by Mr. President doing the work that is necessary to make sure that he fixes the roads in our country.
Just yesterday, we had on Senator Babafemi Ojodu. I'm sure that you must have seen some of the criticism that he's had for, you know, someone that he says he knows pretty well. He's worked with him in the past, as he's even had a relationship. He's a member of the All Progressives Congress, even though he said, oh, don't call me a chieftain of the APC. But we do know that his words carry weight within the party. And he, you know, had to call attention to certain things. He called attention to the Ekiti-Ondo road, where he said, oh, this whole road was awarded for over 90 billion naira. They promised a dualization. Only a single stretch has been delivered. It appears that even the stretch that was delivered is already failing, and he wanted clarity on whether this was what was promised, because what they read was a dualization. Of course, he also took up issue with a number of other things, such as the campaign list, which we will get to. But these are some of the things that Nigerians have noticed. Some Nigerians just notice it and keep quiet and say, well, it's government. But some are bold enough to call it out and say, are you sure that the president is actually on top of what is happening within his cabinet?
The president is on top. Again, let me say, this country is a vast country. Beyond the road construction, there are efforts ongoing in about 9 different other critical sectors, in oil and gas, in health, in education, in agriculture. All of this at the behest and the directive of the president. So it's not just about road construction alone. Having said that, Babafemi Ojodu was once my editor at the News and Tempo. We also know that he belongs to the other side. He's been writing...
the other side? What other side?
He's not on our side. Of course, he said if the president wins the election, he will return to his farm. What he did not tell us was that he will also return to his old profession as a journalist who will write and also criticize government. But let me say this. I think it's important that...
sorry, are you saying there are factions within the APC? Are there factions?
No, we're talking about Babafemi Ojodu. He's clearly not a friend of... Even in his writings, it's been very clear. He's not a friend of this government, this present APC government. And that's different from... I don't know where he really belongs right now. I just know that he writes a lot of articles, criticizes the government. I've read a few of what he writes, almost virtually what he writes. And I think what's important in the the case in point is he has raised a few fundamental issues, and I'm sure the Ministry of Work will respond to those issues as the case may be. But Maupe, what you cannot disagree with is that you have a president and a government, an APC government, that is at work making efforts to meet the challenges facing this country, from road construction to providing quality education, to freeing up resources for our subnationals, to local government autonomy. The list is just long, to providing social safety nets. Again, it's a question of scalability, and it takes time. We're just 3.5 years down the road. But we have seen the president and his team put in place policies and programs that, if fully implemented to the level of scale that is necessary, we will think things turn around.
I was going to take you up on the issue of subsidy, but I know that Ayo has a few questions for you, so let me go to him first. Ayo.
Thank you, Maupe. You know, Dr. Dari, the issues that you have raised are quite germane, but let me begin from the scorecard. As Maupe, you know, quoted, the Ministry of Finance came up with some numbers and all. And this whole subsidy conversation that is coming up again is also referenced in that document. For instance, part of the document highlighted the fact that the salaries, the increased salaries, you know, that government now pays far, you know, has also been taken up by the increased wages, you know, that the federal government now pays. The question around that for me is, it would seem like the federal government generally do not quite communicate well. And I'm glad that you are in the media, so you would understand. Most of the time, we have information put out, but they are just information. They are like raw materials in the market. Anyone can buy any resources. It's the use of them that makes any difference. So when it comes to public communication, there are those who would say that the federal government has generally failed to communicate significantly until there is a blowback. Is there any plan? And I'm glad you're also essay to the president on public communication. What exactly is the plan about communicating, not just informing Nigerians, but communicating with Nigerians about whatever it is that government is doing?
Ayon, thank you for your question. I think the government has never stopped communicating. In fact, one of the pillars of good governance is, you know, a very robust communication effort. And when you talk about communication, you talk about being able to cascade that information to different levels of the society. So yes, there is, because when you have engagements at the level of ministers coming to speak about their work, particularly when you had the scorecard at a time that was necessary, which marked the beginning of the campaign period, there's never been any time where government policies and initiatives are not explained beyond the newspaper headlines. Several other, you know, traditional, no traditional levels of communication. And oftentimes we just look at the English level communication. There's a lot of communication taking place in different languages, in Hausa, in Igbo, in Yoruba, of which we are aware. We have a network of over 350 community radio stations across the length and breadth of this country who provide this information in 7 to 8 different languages. So it also depends on where you're looking, because if you're just tied only to the newspaper headlines or what you see on the networks. So beyond that, you see even the president, when he receives people, when meetings hold, the president, who is the chief marketer, the chief communicator of this administration, is able to speak to numbers, is able to speak to his programs, is able to speak even with empathy, connecting with the sacrifices and support of the Nigerian people. So when it comes to communication, it's the continuum, it's not static. You don't get the quantum of communication once, and it's also progressive. As issues arise, government is expected to respond. And when government responds to those issues, most times, that is communication. Oftentimes, government is also not reactive. We're proactive. We go ahead. And when you do that, sometimes they will say, oh, government is lying. Then you move into the arena of selective amnesia or selective auditioning.
Perhaps, Dr. Dari, and I apologize for butting in. I sincerely apologize. Perhaps that blowback really is a sign that maybe the communication is not complete. Let me cite the precise example that I'm citing. When the Minister of Finance spoke to Nigerians about subsidy savings and all of that, one thing that he said was that the wage adjustments, alone were nearly double the federal government's subsidy savings. Now, a good number of people are still asking, where are the subsidy savings going? Up until the minister spoke, people are asking they are still asking that question. Unfortunately, it would seem like whatever explanation, information going out from government is not really hitting home. Minister, I'm sure you know, Dr. Dyer, that information is not communication. We get the information, but until it is cooked enough for people to understand and assimilate and accept that this is communication, I'm not sure we can say that communication has gone through.
Hey, absolutely.
Particularly, my apologies, sir, especially when you now say that people will hear something and still say it is not true. That a good number of people will tell you that it means that people are not persuaded that whatever information is coming from government is not hitting home.
So you cross the line when you say people are not persuaded, because facts are sacred. So if government says we're doing X number of stuff, we've put in place a policy to help our young people, and people are not persuaded by that, does that change the strength of that policy? No. Again, people have the legitimacy to decide whether they will believe government or not. I agree. You put out information, then you communicate, you try to explain that. And that's what this government is about on a continuous basis. Do you get people persuaded at the first blow? No. That's why it has to be a continuum. And you know, the subsidy debate will never go away. It will, in fact, outlive this government. But then, let me make that point, which has been muted for a while. We were borrowing. This country was borrowing to pay for subsidy. So it wasn't as if a pot of money was immediately created. In fact, under the previous administration, we had sold barrels and barrels of our oil to be able to get money to continue to subsidize the PMS that was coming into the country. Again, because of the policies, the macroeconomic policies of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, we have had the fiscal space expand, providing extra resources that is going to various sectors of the economy, including also paying the wages, the pensioners, giving more money to the governors at the FAC level, freeing up other resources, improving from the tax regime that we have now. We have tax to GDP moving from 10 to 12%. So the macroeconomic basis, fundamentals of our economy has been strengthened and properly restructured. Again, Ayo, you agree with me? You can't build something on nothing. And that's something that we need to build upon, is being done. Again, the work of governance, whether it's even communication, whether it's fixing our roads, whether it's agriculture, is a continuum. And this administration is meeting these challenges.
Okay. Well, there is a critical thing that a good number of people have spoken to and are still speaking about, and I'm sure that Malkwa would still probably take you further on the subsidy removal conversation, which a presidential candidate is already speaking to. And that is the impact of that subsidy removal on a host of Nigerians, which has catalyzed, so to speak, cost of living and its impact on people. We've heard the president say at different fora that, look, the different communities, monarchs, clergymen, everyone should be asking governors, about mitigating the impact of whatever it is that is happening in their communities. So the question then is, while the federal government has largely, and to a good number of people has happened, made the macroeconomic environment of Nigeria better, the microeconomic environment for many Nigerians are still quite questionable. And so there are those who are asking, isn't there anything the president can do to ensure that the governors do the needful to mitigate the cost of living on Nigerians? Because it will definitely be an issue as we build up to the next elections.
Absolutely, Ayo. I think you've touched on a vital issue of the moment. I think that what the president at the federal level had the duty to bake a bigger cake. That is, expand the fiscal space. He brought in a new tax regime, our tax laws. We've seen our revenue go up through the revenue service. We've seen the reserves that we have, both net and gross reserves, go up. We stand at 52 billion in record time. So the president has met the challenge and the duty of baking a bigger cake. And what's that cake? It's the fact. And then the data is out there. When you look at what states were getting before, 1.6 billion, 2 billion, that same state is getting 16 billion. Now, there's an executive list, there's a concurrent list. State governors have executive powers. They come in, they get this allocation. They have responsibilities. The federal government has responsibilities and has met them. The state governors have responsibilities. And the question to interrogate is, are they meeting those responsibilities? And the president, as the leader of government, has called upon them to say, please apply these resources to improve the lives of the citizens in your states. To a large extent, that is what the best president can do at best. Continue to make sure that the allocations increase. The one in July is recorded to be the highest they've ever had. And I think the debate must also shift from that. The radar must move from federal government to the state government. Let's have that conversation. Let's interrogate them. Let them show what they are doing and what they have done. On the part of federal government, we can point to quite a number of things. We can tell you where these monies are channeled. Look at Nelfon, for instance, a runaway success. 1.3 million young people. Just last week, at FEC, the president actually channeled every liquid funds coming recovered by EFCC to go directly into Nelfon. He also said, you know, those that have shares, unclaimed shares and dividends over time, channeled to Nelfon. It's never happened. Those monies are hidden in private, in very funny cloned accounts in the past. That you look at also the conditional cash transfer, targeted for 15 million, about 11 million are already benefiting from that, and quite a number of others. So you can see the federal government meeting its responsibilities. You look at the NG cares. We have seen advanced financing just announced about 6 weeks ago by Mr. President, $3.01 billion. And recall that Okonjo-Iweala, who now heads the WTO, did say very clearly to say what the structural adjustments made, the structural reforms in place, are indeed in tune. But what is needed is that we should expand the social safety nets and programs. And that is what the federal government is doing. Now, if the states complement the effort of the federal government, then we will see that critical development and help. The micro you talk about will increase, and people can benefit tremendously.
You say if the states. It's interesting that about 30 states, if not more, at least are members, their governors are members
31.
Of the, yeah, I know you know the, the actual figure, member
because
of
we're tracking it.
Yes, indeed. And I think you even make my point further. If 31 state governors, as we speak, are members of the All Progressives Congress, All Progressives Congress, there are questions as to how it is that the party cannot state very clearly and categorically what it expects of state governors and in which trajectory or in which direction governors ought to be looking, governors ought to be persuaded to move in to make sure that there is relief for the Nigerian people.
Well, Mope, let me just rephrase that conversation to say that the assumption that the state governors are not doing anything is faulty. They are. The question really is that what is the scalability? What's the scale of that? And are they investing the resources in the right sectors that will impact the lives of the people? The issue really is about how does it impact the ordinary citizen in terms of health, in terms of education, and all of that. Yes, what is expected of the states is clearly stated in the New Hope agenda. I have traveled to 3 regions, the North Central, the Northeast, and the Southeast. And we have seen quite a number of state projects and also federal government projects plugging into each other at that level. We've seen efforts at road construction, we've seen efforts at healthcare, we've seen efforts in agriculture, we've seen efforts in skills development, which also fit into the the larger renewed hope agenda that was promised by Mr. President. And I think what should be our interrogation is, what is the pace? What is the quality? What is the level? Are we getting the quantum of resources? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? And that's what we should interrogate.
Yeah, who should interrogate it? I mean, I'm a journalist. I'm asking questions of not just what the president is doing. I'm asking questions of what the party, the APC, is doing. Because even the president, interestingly, even the president doesn't seem to be impressed by what the governors are doing.
Well, the president is just calling on them to do more.
Exactly.
And that's what he should do. Say, you need to do more.
Said, tell them to do more. No, exactly. Do more and affect the lives of Nigerians where it matters.
And I believe they're beginning to do that.
Beginning to do that at the twilight of the administration. Is it now that campaigns are here?
Some of the projects we saw, and I've been to about maybe 14 states, some of the projects we saw have a lifespan of 2 years. So it did not just begin a few months ago. And honestly, we went with about 65 journalists, videos, this is evidential. Again, when it comes to good governance, it's also about the scalability. What is the quantum?
Yeah, do you think it's a lack of understanding of, prioritizing the areas that truly affect the lives of people? Because let's be frank, we have a cost of living crisis on our hands. I'm going to read out, this is a critique, because as a result of this particular conversation that has just been reignited, quite a number of columnists have now written. Yes, have now written. I'm sure you must have read quite a number of them. I'm going to read that of Waziri Adio, who is a former DG of Naiti. And he says something to the effect that, yes, there is no coordinated and faithfully implemented plan for cushioning the well-anticipated harsh effects of the reform, especially on the poor. The cash transfer of a meager 75,000 naira in total to 15 million households has been poorly and shamefully implemented. The commitment to lowering food prices has been half-hearted. These are things that the Tinubu administration came in guns a-blazing, let me borrow President Trump's words, to try and do. People thought, okay, if you try and do this, even the CNG plan was something that people thought, okay, well, if, petrol is so expensive, perhaps if you put a CNG tank in your car, maybe you should still be able to get about. But people who use CNG say it is rarely available. I live along an area where you see CNG queues, and the queues always form a snake. It is usually quite lengthy. So there are questions as to what exactly has this administration faithfully implemented in trying to mitigate the cost of living crisis that has now accompanied these reforms that they have started?
Okay, let me respond. First, there are no quick fixes. When you're faced with challenges, when you have to solve problems, there are no quick fixes. But the starting point for development experts is that you must have a plan. You must have a policy. And then policies and plans have a span. And then you implement gradually. And even during implementation, you have that flexibility to review. Let me take the CNG, for instance. The CNG is progressing. Of course, we expect that more stations, people will spend less hours. But what we've had in the last 2 years is trying to build that backbone that is needed for the CNG. It was announced as a policy, but to build that backbone across the length and breadth of the country takes some time. As we speak now, the filling stations for the CNG has increased by 35%. And if that increase continues, by the time 2 years down the road, we're looking at about 70% coverage. That is progress. So when somebody writes and talks in absolute terms that there's no plan, excuse me, the CNG is a plan. The NEL fund is a plan. The legacy roads we're building is a plan. The NG cares is a plan. So you don't talk in absolute terms, there's no plan. You track the implementation of that plan. If you have criticism about it, profile suggestions in that direction. But to say there's no plan, no coordinated plan, no.
I don't think that's what he said. So there's no coordinated and faithfully implemented.
But implementation is afoot. When you talk about the Benin-Asaba road, for instance, somebody identified that road. Somebody put it in the budget. The president approved the budget. Funds were released. Contractors were moved to site. That is a faithful implementation that is now aborted because of the technical competence of the person. When you talk about NEL fund that came on, that is a plan. That is a faithful implementation. That's why 1.3 million Nigerian youths are benefiting and more of them are still applying.
Mrs. Diary, you do know
there's
that,
an implementation of food.
I mean, it's the fact that Nigerians had to cry out over that road. That's how we got to know
but again,
that,
I said that's just one of so many other roads.
That's the situation. So until Nigerians scream about what exactly they are facing in certain areas where you might think that there is a faithfully implemented plan, we might not exactly know.
Well, you know, Mope, you also know that governance is all inclusive. It's also important that citizens also play a role. When you see something going wrong, you speak up. Now, when government does not respond, that's why you have a problem. No government at every time knows exactly what's happening everywhere in the country. But then when it comes to the fore, when it comes to the media, when citizens crowd, and then the government does not respond, then you have a crisis. But in this place, you have a responsive leadership.
Well, I do know that we still have, it's just 1 week down. We still have a few more months.
5 months ahead of us.
Yes, indeed, to continue to have this conversation. Yes, indeed. And I know that even in this time, Nigerians will certainly be sending their responses to what it is that you're telling them. But we have to thank you. It's a pity
subsidy,
we didn't get to the campaign council list. We understand it's been withdrawn. Can you confirm that to us?
No, the campaign council list has not been withdrawn. As it is with every other list, there's a room for subcommittees. Those subcommittees have not been formed. And so many other names will come into that subcommittee. So that list has not been withdrawn. The APC has issued a statement to that effect yesterday. That list stands, but of course there will be adjustments. The list is not cast in stone, just like every other list. Subcommittees will...
So it's subject to review?
The subcommittees will be, not a review, just adjustments where necessary. But importantly, subcommittees will be formed.
Yeah, reluctant to use the word review, but adjustments.
When you say review, it's wholesale. This is not wholesale. Adjustments are just minor adjustments here and there.
Well, I think it's a matter of semantics now. But we have to thank you very much for speaking with us this morning. Dr. Sunday Diary, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Public Communication. And he's been speaking with us here in our Abuja studios.